Welcome to MedHeads, the weekly show that brings a biopsychosocial focus to issues of the day, along with special guests who will showcase their expertise and enthusiasm about their field of practice. Your host, Dr. Fergal Armstrong.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong and welcome to MedHeads. Today we have a very special guest, Marty Kendall, who is a data biologist. Hello Marty, how are you?
Hey Fergal, great to chat to you again.
Great to have you back on the show. Now, I described you as a data biologist, but your background originally was engineering, isn't it?
Yeah, engineer by day and passion of nutrition and to make nutritional density available to everybody. So that's what we're hopefully going to be talking about today.
Absolutely, yeah. But it was your engineering background that got you into the concept of number crunching, and it's your ability to number crunch that gives the validity that is needed to your concept of nutritional density. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Everything can be quantified with numbers and optimized to make life better.
Sure. So nutritional density, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, I suppose for me, it's the basic unit of measurement of energy. We all eat a certain amount of calories per day, whether that be 1,600 or 2,000 or a whole lot more. But we basically need a certain amount of calories to maintain our weight. So nutritional density is making sure we've got the nutrients we need within those calories. So basically it's nutrients per calorie, or particularly the harder to find nutrients per calorie.
And from my understanding of my reading of your website, and we'll put links to your website underneath this video. My understanding is that I was going to use the word deficiency, but we're not going to use that because you're going to comment on the difference between deficiency and suboptimal levels. But suboptimal levels of nutrients in our diet cause craving, which then cause us to eat more nutrient poor foods, which then cause us to put on weight and become obese. That's basically the concept that underpins nutritional density. Is that right? Have I got that right?
Yeah, definitely. We've seen that trend of people who tend to eat nutrient poor foods tend to get a lot more energy to get the nutrients the body craves. And, everybody, different people have weird cravings for chocolate or whatever that particular craving is. And our body's just an amazing machine that knows what it needs at a particular time and sends us in search for that food that contains it.
Right. So tell me, what's the difference in your view between the recommended daily allowances of various micronutrients and what you're advocating for, which is much, much higher levels?
Yeah, the recommended daily intake is basically the amount to prevent deficiency in most of the population. So they've worked out the amount of vitamin B1 or B3 that is seen with avoiding thiamine deficiency, which is beriberi, or peligro, which is associated with a lack of B3. So that's the amount that prevents deficiency, but the amount that's related to optimal satiety and performance and mitochondrial function is actually quite a bit more than that. So in the data analysis we've done, we've seen that people, when they get those higher levels of nutrients, their satiety kicks in and they tend to eat a lot more. So yeah, we've been able to break down the satiety response to all the different micronutrients as well as the macronutrients to actually help identify which foods and meals and recipes help people calm their appetite and be very happy with the amount of food they're eating.
So if I'm getting this right, what you're saying is that if we can increase the relevant amount of nutrients in food, we can feel more full more quickly, and therefore ultimately we end up eating less, and therefore we can manage overweight obesity, the obesity epidemic. And is that the basic message?
Yeah, that's basically it. As we focus on nutrient-dense foods, we're more energized, we feel our mitochondria functions better, and we're craving less food.
Right. Now, we're using these technical words, macronutrients, micronutrients. So Phil, let's just explain for our audience, what is a macronutrient?
So macronutrient is the large energy containing nutrients such as protein, carbs, fat. I mean, you might even talk about alcohol or exogenous ketones as
Mm,
macronutrients that contain energy.
yeah.
And then the micronutrients are the vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids, amino acids that don't necessarily contain energy, but they're essential to our bodily function.
Right, right. So the list of micronutrients is almost endless. But can you just give us an idea of some of the more important micronutrients?
Yeah, I suppose it depends on the individual, and a lot of people in our modern society are getting enough amino acid, which is the protein, because we tend to eat a fairly protein-rich diet, but we tend to lack maybe vitamin B1, thiamine, um, potassium, magnesium, these other nutrients that are harder to find in our diet. So that's why it's important to look at what's your current diet, what are you currently eating, and therefore for you, which nutrients do you need to actually chase to optimize your nutrient density and promote satiety and better energy levels.
And you've also, on the subject of satiety, excuse me, you've come up with a graph or a scatter plot, have you not,
Mm,
that compares satiety with nutrition density. And I was looking at this the other night, and not surprisingly, bagels they don't they don't they don't cause satiety, nor are they
no,
that nutritionally dense. But one of the things
no.
that was in the scatter plot, one of the things that was positioned close to bagels, and I find this surprising, was actually Brazil nuts. You
Yeah,
know, on your scatter plot, Brazil nuts are in the same area as bagels, so they're not very, they don't promote satiety, and nor are they nutritionally dense.
yeah,
I find that
yeah. It
surprising.
was. It's satiety per calorie. So the things that provide low satiety are those energy dense foods that have low protein and more energy, more easily accessible energy from
Yeah,
fat and carbohydrate together. So yeah,
yeah,
it's those foods that were typically available maybe in autumn that drove us to
yeah,
get more fat on for winter to survive the
yeah,
winter that tends
yeah.
to drive us to eat a whole lot more.
So unfortunately, we live in a life where we live in a world rather where all the yummy foods are actually bad for us. You know, because if you look at the others, the kind of the diagonal of that scatter plot, I can remember as a child thinking, "Oh dear Lord, I've got to eat more broccoli and cauliflower." But lo and behold, broccoli and cauliflower are right up there at the top, where you know they're very nutritionally dense, and they also
Yep.
promote satiety. You know, so I can understand that as a concept. But what you're saying is that in nature, most foods are actually dense nutritionally and do promote satiety, whereas it's the more
Mm.
refined foods that are no are low nutritionally dense and do not provide satiety. That's the dichotomy here, isn't it? It's nature versus
Yeah.
refined foods.
Yeah.
Except
Yeah. And
for,
and Brazil nuts were those ones that are really energy dense and amazing in nature, but we've taken it even further and produced all these incredible foods that are
yeah,
highly refined, ultra processed, and nutrient
yeah,
poor, which
yeah.
enable get a lot more with very little nutrition at the same time.
So apart from the situation of nuts, which you have a theory of, and that nuts are
Mm.
the really the only source of the combination of high fat
Mm.
and protein. No, is it no?
Mm.
You said high fat and carbs that are used
Yeah.
for laying on fat for the winter.
Mm.
Basically, what you're saying is anything that you need to look at the ingredient list for is refined and not as good for you as
Yeah,
anything you may be
anything
told.
that's got a massively long list of ingredients that you can't pronounce and food colorings that make up for the fact that it's not actually nutritious or flavors that make up for the fact that it's not nutritious is probably a
Yeah,
red flag to say, do I really need this? And especially if it's got refined, you know, seed oils, vegetable oils combined with refined flours at the same
yeah,
time. It's
yeah,
pretty much a franken food that you're gonna once you pop, you just can't stop, and it's probably a warning that it's probably not an optimal food for you.
So that's a really important point, I think, to make, is that the refined foods, the modern foods, cornstarch, sugar syrups, these are all very bad for you because they don't promote satiety and they're nutritionally not dense. They don't have that nutrition,
Yep.
that nutrient background.
Mm.
Even though they look nice, they taste nice, they look nice in the shops, they taste nice, they're just not good for you.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I think that scatter plot that you've got there and on your website is fabulous, and I would urge our viewers to actually take a look at that in great detail.
yep.
I chose the thing about cauliflower and broccoli versus bagels and Brazil nuts because I thought it was a good representation of the dichotomy. And it reminds me of the story that when I was a kid growing up, my brother used to say to my mother, he used to say, "Mom, I'm not hungry for my vegetables. I'm only hungry for my pudding." which, which to me epitomizes the
Yeah,
ills that our current society is experiencing with the obesity epidemic. How do you get
yeah,
over that? Because quite frankly, I mean, honestly, I'd much rather have an ice cream and a bagel than I would a cauliflower and broccoli soup. How do you get
yeah.
over that?
You make a nutrient density sound pretty unattractive at the moment, Fergal. I'm not sure about this interview where it's heading, but I suppose the reality is once you like those foods that are designed for maximal profit with really cheap ingredients with a whole lot of
Yeah,
fake flavors and colors are designed to
yeah,
produce this massive dopamine hit that reinforces our need for those foods, and we keep on eating them
yeah,
again and again. But once we take out that, anything in nature, the screen, anything that's provides that massive dopamine hit, binge watching your favorite
yeah,
whatever, or all those bad things that we shouldn't have too much of. Once you back down that dopamine and go, well, this food actually contains the nutrients I need. It provides
yes,
a real pleasure and a real robust pleasure. And it doesn't
yeah,
always have to live on broccoli and bland cauliflower, but
yeah,
once you actually get the nutrients in your food that you actually need, it tastes really good. And my
yeah,
kids really enjoy real food rather than going out to Macca's, and they learnt to
yeah,
taste that. Yeah, this food tastes really awful, and I don't really enjoy it. I don't really feel good, and my gut
yeah,
hurts, and I feel sleepy,
yeah,
and I feel fat. And
yeah.
once you start to enjoy those positive foods, it's a new way of thinking and feeling. But it does take a while to wean yourself off that.
So you've actually managed to, with this concept of nutritional density, you've actually managed to create a whole series of recipe books that
Yeah,
are not only tailored to nutritional density, and not only I've looked at a couple of the recipes. Some of the food there looks fabulous, but it's not only tailored to nutritional density. It's also gone a degree beyond that. It's tailored to disease or dysfunction specific individuals, isn't it? So
yeah,
you've managed to escape from this view that the only thing that's nice to eat is chocolate and bagels and macros. You've managed to escape from that and prove in real life that actually good food, nutritious food, is yummy, and it can also be tailored
yeah,
to specific individual needs.
yeah. Yeah, we really wanted to show with the recipe books how good food could look, and there's so many
Yeah,
debates about what nutrition should be, and we thought, hey, if we just
yeah,
show what amazing food looks like, they'll
yeah,
understand. And yeah, we've dialed it in for a whole range of goals and a whole range of preferences, whether you're managing diabetes and want to stabilize your blood sugars, or losing weight, or a bodybuilder or an athlete,
yeah,
or you prefer a plant-based diet or a vegetarian diet. We can dial all those in, but
yeah,
we can also target specific nutrients in your food that are related to different diseases. And say if you want to
yeah.
recover from MS, or whatever your current situation is, we can target the nutrients that are more related to those particular conditions. And here are the recipes that will help you get more of those nutrients.
Yeah. So the key message there is that a healthy diet full of nutritionally dense foods tailored to your individual needs
Mm,
is actually better for you in the long term and actually tastes great and looks great on the
Yeah.
plate. Yeah, and that's
Yeah, it
that's where
does.
your recipe
If
books
your
comes
food
in.
looks and tastes great without a whole lot of
Yeah,
artificial garbage on top of it,
yeah,
then you're doing
yeah,
pretty well.
yeah. Now you mentioned a certain number of disease states or kind of personal traits. I just want, before we kind of look a little bit more into the specific traits and the specific conditions, generally speaking, I'm a herbivore and my wife is a carnivore. So what kind of foods would a herbivore need to eat to optimize health? And what kind of foods would a carnivore have to eat to optimize health?
Yeah, I suppose the bottom line for us is we find that a mixed diet somewhere between the extremes enables you to get keys and animal food that tend to give you a nice range. But if you're right at the carnivore end,
We're going to have to start again on that question because the internet dropped out there.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
fine.
right. I'll ask you the question again. Yeah.
Did you want to go through those SpectraCell charts as well, or
Yeah,
is
I was
that?
just going to mention them not in great detail because this is for a general audience, but yeah, I'll just
Yeah, yeah, cool, cool. Okay.
so we'll talk about carnivore, herbivore, and then we'll go through the types of conditions that can be treated with tailored diet. Yeah.
Did,
All
did,
right.
did you want me to try going on to my phone for the internet, Tony? If we're having dropouts, we shouldn't have dropouts, but
It's only the audio dropped out
okay,
while
cool.
you were talking.
We'll just try it. All right. I'll
Okay,
ask you the question
we'll
again.
keep going. Yeah, go again.
You said I'm a herbivore, my wife.
Yeah. I'll start from there. Right. So Marty, I'm generally speaking a herbivore, and my wife is a carnivore. But looking at what you've put on the net, it appears that herbivores and carnivores in general, they need different kinds of food because they've got a relative deficiency in certain types of foods. Is that right?
Yeah, we tend to find a blend of plants and animal and seafood together tend to give you the best chance of getting a well-rounded micronutrient dense diet. But if you're at the carnivore end of the spectrum, maybe you need to try and ensure you've got some liver or kidney or organ meats that contain those minerals that tend to be contained in vegetables.
Right.
Whereas if you're at the plant-based end of the spectrum, then you really need to go out of your way to make sure you're getting bioavailable protein in your diet and also omega-3 and B12, which tend to be more prevalent in plant-based foods. So we can deal with either of those extremes, and makes me wonder whether between the two of you as a married couple, you might be able to, not sure whether the nutrition blends across there somehow, but I don't think that works actually, but
Well,
it's an interesting situation.
Jack Sprat could eat no fat, his wife could eat no lean. But between them both, they licked the platter clean. She eats the steak and I eat the chips. That's how it works in my household.
I'm sure she might be getting the better end of the deal there, but anyway.
But so, I mean, it's my understanding that herbivores or people who predominantly eat a plant-based diet, they tend to struggle with their B12, their glutamine, their and other essential amino acids, and also omega-3s.
Yeah.
Is that the
Yeah.
case? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that's definitely the trend we see.
Yeah.
And
So how
B1.
would a herbivore then get B12 rather than popping a pill? What
Oh,
food
wow.
would be?
That it can actually be quite challenging to get from plant-based foods, and a lot of really strict plant-based followers tend to have injections or pills or
Yeah.
try supplements or nutritional yeast can actually be a thing that gives plant-based followers a really nice blend of B vitamins that can be harder to
Yeah.
get.
Yeah. So I suppose it's important to emphasize at this point that when I said B12, actually what you're saying is that the B vitamins in general are more difficult to access for people who eat a plant-based diet. And those B vitamins would include things like thiamine, riboflavin, pantothenic acid, and of course hydroxycobalamin, B12, and folic acid. So what you're saying then is all of the B vitamins can be an issue for predominant herbivores.
Yeah, particularly B12 and omega-3. But
Yeah.
on the upside, the people following a whole food plant-based diet are getting a lot of green leafy vegetables, which are packed with minerals, which a lot of the more carnivore and general population aren't getting a lot of. But I suppose the risk of a plant-based diet, which is a term that triggers me a little bit because it's so wide and broad, a lot of the time a plant-based diet just means avoiding animal-based foods, which can end up being a lot of really, really heavily processed foods. So I think my view is that the plant-based trend plays into big food to a large extent because it's those refined grains and refined oils that are really profitable for the food industry. That, if they promote that plant-based trend, which sounds really good, they're not
Yeah.
necessarily getting a great nutritional density out of that.
Yeah. So it's important to eat a mixed diet, and plant-based foods need to be non-refined. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
moving on to carnivores. What kind of nutritional issues would a carnivore experience, do you reckon?
Yeah, I suppose that the benefit of carnivore is you're getting a whole lot of bioavailable protein, which is a big deal for a lot of people, and a lot of people are getting too much of that refined stuff that doesn't have a lot of bioavailable protein in it. So that's a benefit, and they get plenty of B vitamins, but it's those minerals, potassium, magnesium,
Yeah.
can be a lot harder to find in a
Yeah.
carnivorous diet, and
Yeah.
yeah, especially if they're not eating a lot of organ meats, and not many um, people following a carnivore diet tend to eat a lot of organ meats at the same time just because they're not very popular.
Right. So that's interesting. I didn't realize that if you were just eating steak rather than offal, liver, kidney,
Mm.
you are prone to nutritional deficiencies, especially in things like magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, that
They're
kind of thing.
definitely harder to find without that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
but
So
then
is that
if you overdo the organ meats, you can get too much copper and throw out your
right,
copper zinc ratios, etc. But yeah,
right, right. So is that the underlying reason why we always talk about a steak and kidney pie rather than a steak and steak pie? I never understood the point of a steak and kidney pie,
maybe
but
maybe
but what you're
grandma
saying
knew
is that
something.
yeah, what you're saying is that we need these organ meats to actually balance out our diet if we are a carnivore. Is that right?
They're definitely helpful to
Yeah,
improve your nutrient
yeah.
density. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Right,
Mm.
I thought that the muscle meat and organ meat was the same in terms of its nutritional qualities, except liver.
No,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean
no,
you it.
definitely a lot of organ meats are amazing, and
Yeah,
seafood is particularly incredible for
yeah,
those minerals as well.
yeah, yeah. So moving on to liver. I mean, liver's very rich in vitamin A. I mean, is it possible to overdose? Do you reckon?
It's definitely possible. There's stories
Mm,
of explorers who have, who've been starving and dehydrated and ate
yeah,
their skinny dog's liver and got quite sick. But
yeah,
in real life, that's fairly rare with real food.
yeah,
Um, but from supplements, it's definitely possible to overdose because the vitamin A in animal-based foods is
mm,
in the form that we use, so it's very
mm,
highly bioavailable.
yeah.
But for most people, a little bit of liver and then focusing on the other harder to find nutrients once they get the vitamin A is a good approach.
Right, right. So the key message here is moderation,
Variety in your diet, yeah.
variety. Yeah. Now, moving on to your concept of the use of nutrition to optimize health.
Mm,
Your website lists a number of conditions that can be optimized by
mm.
optimizing nutrition. Do you want to talk us through a little bit about that? So, I mean, I think diabetes was the first on the list.
Yeah, definitely. Diabetes, a lower insulin load diet that will help you stabilize blood sugars is a really important step. But
Hmm.
a lot of it comes back to your mitochondrial function and your ability for your cells in your body to produce energy. And all these vitamins and minerals are critical to those. And yeah, on the website, I've got a number of charts from SpectraCell, who's a testing
Yeah,
company, but they've accumulated a whole range of research relating to the conditions and the nutrients that tend to be deficient in those conditions. So it's really powerful information. And then we can say, well, if you're deficient in these nutrients, then here are the foods that will help you if you're suffering from this condition that tends to be related to those nutritional deficiencies. And there's heaps of amazing stories. And you might have heard of Terry Wiles, who's looked at MS and then done a whole lot of other research into the nutritional, the benefits of optimizing nutrient density to help all those different conditions, and got some amazing results from real food, not supplements.
Not
particularly.
supplements, yeah. So I was looking through that list of conditions. I mean, the things that really interested me were, apart from diabetes, was the relationship between diet and testosterone and estrogen and fatigue and fertility, and then thyroid diseases and particularly inflammation. Because one of my interests is the role of using lifestyle, including diet, to minimize inflammatory risks, to then therefore minimize the risk of progression of degenerative brain disease. So I was particularly interested to read those, because the proper balance of sex hormones, thyroid hormones, and the proper regulation of inflammatory responses via, for instance, the ratio between omega-3 and omega-6 is crucial to degenerative brain functioning. Degenerative brain diseases, including Alzheimer's and proper brain functioning. So tell us, this data that you've got, where does that data come from?
The two main data sets. One is we had 500,000 days of MyFitnessPal data, where people that they did a data mining expedition and pulled down a whole lot of data from MyFitnessPal users that gave us data about macronutrients. But from our little project, Nutrient Optimizer, we've had I think it's about 5,000 people upload their data from Chronometer, which pulls in all the micronutrient data, which is the vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids, and amino acids. So from that, we've got 60,000 days of data that we've then interrogated to look at the satiety response, and therefore what aligns with an optimal achievable intake from whole food for each of those micronutrients, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fabulous. And we'll put the links to this website that you've got on our site as well, so that the viewers at home can look at this. Now, you've used the word bioavailability in our discussion.
Yeah.
Can you clarify what that means?
Yeah, interesting. I suppose so. Animal protein is highly bioavailable because it's in the form that is easily used by the body. And similarly, there's other there's pre-vitamin A or pro-vitamin A, and the vitamin A that's used in our body. And some nutrients, particularly in plant-based foods, have to be converted to the usable form in our body by our body before they're actually used in the body. So some like tofu and soy protein powder and those sorts of plant-based foods do tend to be quite bioavailable, but once you start getting into grains and especially gluten, they tend to be not very very bioavailable. And similarly with omega-3 from plant-based foods, they tend to not be very bioavailable. So it gets to be a complex rabbit hole fairly quickly, but as long as you're getting enough nutrients in your diet from a variety of sources, your body tends to know what to do with those going forward. But yeah.
But broadly speaking, then, if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is that the plant-based foods require more digestion to extract the nutrients than do meat-based foods. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or once they're digested, they need to then be processed into the nutrient form that your body can use.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, one of the great paradoxes is actually, you've brought this up, you've triggered me with your words about grains, is that, you know, one of the biggest staples that we have in our Western diet is actually grain, is starch, is corn, and yet gluten, and yet, you know, there are so many of us that have trouble with gluten sensitivity, celiac disease, and that's really a form of bioavailability issue, isn't it? Because to actually digest this starch, you end up having to produce a toxic intermediary that affects your gut and potentially affects so many other functions in the body.
The invention of agriculture and grains is really powerful because it enabled us to capture energy really easily and really efficiently, and then we add chemical fertilizers into the picture, which enables us to take methane out of the ground and just inject it into our food system and get all this energy, which is great and helps us to grow the population really quickly. But from a nutrient density and actual maintaining a healthy weight and satiety and all those other things, it's not so flash.
Sure. So you've mentioned vitamin supplements. Here's I'm being deliberately polemical, as I'm sure you realize. Why not just take a pill and keep eating the steak and the chips and the cream bun?
Well, you can keep eating the steak as long as you get some veggies with it. But definitely.
You know, if the basic concept is that our obesity epidemic is due to a lack of micronutrients, why not just take a pill full of micronutrients?
Yeah, and well, if you go try and take the magnesium and potassium and sodium that you need in a powder form per day, you'll end up on the toilet for half an hour just getting it out. So your body just doesn't process it very well. Your body doesn't process it in the concentrated form. And you really don't. The vitamins are really easy to pack into a pill because vitamins are very small. But when it comes to minerals, they're much bigger. And then amino acids are bulky as well. So you might as well just eat the steak. And get some veggies as well. But and then they're not in the same form that your body knows what to do with, and the right ratios that your body needs to have. And then they're also not in, there's a lot of things other than just the essential nutrients. There's a lot of other nutrients that come from the soil that go into our food. If that food is grown in a healthy, robust environment that's in touch with nature and, a regenerative agriculture, which is, full of animals and plants all working happily together the way that Mother Nature intended. So that actually gets nutrients into your body in the way that your body knows what to deal with and all the nutrients it needs rather than just the pill. And you don't hear of many people just thriving from, this fake food gruel that often tends to be hyper palatable at the same time with all the fortification in it. People get healthy from eating real food that looks like food.
And I suppose one of the issues that I've got is actually for the fats, certainly for the fat-soluble vitamins, it's very easy to kind of develop toxicity if you take too much of it. Not so much for the water-soluble vitamins, but certainly for the fat-soluble vitamins. Now, Marty, as usual, we just don't have enough time. But before we close off, I want you to tell me, what is an A nutrient?
Oh, or an anti-nutrient?
An anti-nutrient.
Anti-nutrient. There are compounds in our foods like oxalates that tend to dilute the absorption in our body, like as you mentioned, the grains, and there's particular factors in our food that mean we don't absorb it as well. So and we don't use it as well, and then they're not bioavailable in our bodies. So, but again, it's like if you're focusing on those nutrient-dense whole foods to contain the nutrients you need, a lot of the foods that contain all those anti-nutrients and are nutrient poor are eliminated, which is the good news.
Right. There's just so much to talk about, Marty. We are going to have to wrap it up here. So what I would ask you to come back and have another chat with us very shortly, and we'll explore this subject. We'll explore this subject further. But for the meantime, thank you so much for your pearls of wisdom.
Thank you. Great to chat again, Fergal.
That's it for today's show. My name is Dr. Fergal Armstrong. Thank you for joining us.